Hi there, I'm Garrard, and I'm the music supervisor for the Burnt Part Boys. A lot of the prep for this is similar to being a music director. Music is you're learning the score. You're doing a lot of listening to a lot of reference recordings. You're referencing and making notes of what instruments are playing when, who's doing what, and how that all fits together. Before you contact any musicians or have anything, you have to spend a lot of time making sure that you know the ins and outs of how the score is put together, all the vocal parts, how the instrumental parts are working together. And once you have an idea for what's happening in all 21 tunes in this, then you can start doing the next step of that. So I made lots of notes in my scores, a lot like what a orchestral conductor would do. So I made lots of notes, entrances and exits, instrumentation, time changes, tempo changes, feel changes, because the more familiar I am with all those things, the easier I can communicate to our musicians when we eventually had them in for rehearsal. And especially since we only had one rehearsal before a recording session, I need to make sure that I was prepared as best I could to make sure I could answer any questions that they may have. Right, so after you've analyzed your score and you've organized and you have all notes of kind of how it musically has to sound, then you have to think about the audio engineering recording side of things. When you have live musicians, you can just talk to them, you can make changes on the fly, you can direct how quickly they're going to speed up or how they're going to slow down or how they're going to wait for different things. When you're in a recording situation, you don't have that option. The track is going to play. And so we're going to have to adjust to the track, so which means we had to take in a lot of these other musical considerations of things that we couldn't do live and make sure that they were accounted for when we did our recordings. So the first thing we had to do, create a master session computer file for everything, where it labeled how fast everything was going to be, do different markers to make sure that we knew when we had to edit where different measures were going to be, how fast, how slow things were going to be for every single track into it. And some of them go into each other, so some of these session files are really, really long. So that's the first step. In my case, I was doing all of that and recording the guitar parts and packing my house to move across the country so I could be up here with you lovely people. So you have to do all of that happened in, I want to say, the span of 4 or 5 days. And so I sat and prepped everything. The first step is you make click tracks. That way you have a master ruler of where everything goes. So no matter how people play, you always have an anchor or a reference to go back to. And because a lot of the songs will just speed up, slow down, or you have to leave space in that, you have to pre-program the tempos for everything. And so first of all, you have to figure out how fast they're going to go. So you talk to the creative team, you look at reference recordings to have an idea how fast or slow things are, and then you just have to make creative decisions about how those are going to work. What we ended up doing was for a lot of our repeated sections, a lot of our vamps, whereas live, you could just wait for them to say the thing and then keep going. We had to figure out how many times we had to keep going and then maybe leave ourselves room to fix that once we're in rehearsals. So we had to make it a master list of what all that was, master list of all tempo changes, master list of how fast or slow everything's going to be, put all of that into a document, put all of that into a computer file, and then we can start talking to musicians and recording studios. We utilized a percussionist friend of mine that I've used for lots of other musical theater projects named Nico, and then a good friend of mine from recording school, Matt, in his studio, Down the Way Studio. And so for about 16 total hours over the course of about 3 or 4 days, we recorded all of the drum parts, we recorded all of the percussion parts, we recorded all of the auxiliary things. So we had a lot of things like we have chains dropping in buckets, we've got lots of interesting cymbal hits, we've got all kinds of interesting percussion toys that we added to that. And the fun thing about that is when you hire a percussionist to bring a lot of stuff to it, they work very, very collaborative. Especially using their classical training background and their performance background, they can often offer up different kinds of solutions for different sounds or timbres. So one of my favorite ones was we have a bucket that's going to start climbing song, and he brought me 3 different buckets to choose from. He brought me 8 different sets of sticks to hit it with, and then he brought me all kinds of ways to manipulate and change that bucket to make sure we could get the maximum different sounds out of it that we could. And so that's one of the benefits of working and having the time in the recording studio to really play around and to really find those sounds and to give yourselves options. So after you have your master session files, because you have individual musicians that are just going to be playing along in isolation to a click track, they're playing without context. They don't have other musicians to play along or play off of. They don't have vocalists who are singing that denote a context of anything. So I went ahead and created temporary bass, string, and piano parts for all of those, because we were going to be recording drums first. This gives the drummer more context of what they're playing along with and helps them really find the groove and find the sounds that we're looking for. So a big priority for us during this was to make sure that we had local musicians, that we hired local talent, that we had people that were native to this area. That way we could bring that local sound, their experience, and making sure that we are truly a theater for the rest of the community. So we went through all of our applicants over the course of maybe a week or so, and then we made some choices of our top choices for local players. After that, we looked for local studios to make sure we can continue with our mission of helping and being engaged in the community. So we ended up with the Eagle Room, which is in Weaverville, just a little bit north of Asheville. And we chose them for a couple of different reasons. One, their engineer Matt there has a lot of experience as a bluegrass fiddle player and as a pedal steel player. We had a small, intimate space so our players could see each other and work on the musicality and the true performance aspect. That way we could keep the live player feel. And he was very, very helpful in our process. Having done musicals before, having done commercial music before, being really invested in the project, I'm really glad that we chose him. So we hired the musicians, and they had the music for a week. Only a week. They practiced it in isolation using all the practice tracks that we've made, all of the rehearsal things. I sent them all the click tracks. I sent them all the different instrument pre-builds that I had, and they had 1 week. And then we had a rehearsal. That was one 8-hour rehearsal, and then we were in the studio for 8 hours a day for the next 3 days. And so over the course of 3 days, we recorded our string players and we recorded our bass player. All 21 songs happened in about a total of 24 recording hours. That's not including all the editing and everything that comes after that. And so the first 2 days we were able to knock out a lot of our recording, and then we used the last day to touch up, to go back, to redo, to punch in with some other kinds of things. And for only having the books for a week, they were really stellar players. They did an amazing job with all of the material. And again, they're all from our local community. Mead Richter, a master fiddler player, on violin. We had Olivia on viola, and then we had Jackson on our electric and stand-up bass.
My name is Jack Hopper.
My name is Olivia Massey.
And I play electric and upright bass.
And I play the viola in the Burnt Part Boys. So for me, from the time we got the music to the time that we had to rehearse was about a week. And now knowing what that preparation was and what it takes in order to prepare for that short amount of time is something that I'll take with me forever. Just because a week to prepare music is something that I've actually never had to do before. So taking all of what I had to learn in my practice time to the rehearsal to the recording studio was priceless.
I've always loved musical theater, and this one was really interesting because it was a recording session, and I've never done much things like that. So having this kind of experience for another thing that I love in musical theater is kind of a combination of interests. My favorite song is definitely Family Tree. The bass line is super funky and fun to play, and it goes all over the place, and that one's a fun one.
The differences in folk, there's Americana, there's Broadway, there's rag, we had funk, we had everything in this musical. So being able to switch over from the different types of feels and what that looks like in time signatures, even in key signatures, the way that you had to be able to incorporate it was definitely something that was a challenge at times, but it was definitely worth it in the end.
Well, working with Bo and the rest of the band has just been an absolute pleasure. His help in the creative process has really stuck with me, and how we're collaborating together and coming to decisions and how he's helping guide and shepherd those things. It's just been an absolute blast, and I'll definitely take it with me to the next opportunity.
After you've recorded all of the instruments, then comes the part of editing everything. We hired great musicians, and even great musicians make mistakes sometimes, and that's what the editing process is for. So for our drum player, we had about 14 individual tracks that we had to edit together, and then we would switch them down in basically a left-right track. So do that times 21 for every song that they're playing in. Our piano player is Matt Stern, who you all might recognize as our music director and vocal director for Rock of Ages. Matt Stern recorded everything virtually for us, so I gave him all that. So that's 21 different piano tracks that we have to bounce down and edit. And then our violin, viola, and bass tracks, and our guitar tracks, which you all had to bounce down 21 times into the final versions that we had to do. Then we move on to our mixing phase, which allows us to add little extra layers of completeness, helps us make timbral and textural choices to make sure the sounds sound exactly the way we want to, using different kinds of studio tools and effects, bounce all of that down into individual tracks, that way I can live mix them every night. And that's how we created the tracks. On bigger shows, music supervisor is part of a larger music team of maybe 4-6 people, especially on larger Broadway shows. And here we work collaboratively with the rest of the creative team. It was a lot of fun. It was a big challenge to do all of this in a tight time frame to make sure that we maintain the quality that we wanted. And I think it's really important is with art, it's really about the process. You have to fall in love with the process. Sometimes you get focused on the finished product and what that finished product looks like, but you have to really learn to enjoy making the thing and going through all the steps to actually make the process. And I think that's where a lot of the true artistry comes from. That's something you really have to learn to enjoy.